our thinking about translation and about boundaries and about centers, and you have a wonderful grasp of the history of translation studies, and you've thought a lot about many of these issues. I don't know where to begin my reaction. I think I'll begin at the beginning, and the Benjamin, Übersetzung ist ein Form. Benjamin is very tricky, of course, and he's almost saying Übersetzung is an anti-form. What he is getting at in this essay goes beyond any sort of sense-making, normative, shared assumptions about translation. He's really almost inventing a new way of thinking outside of forms. And he even goes so far as to say no translation is ever intended for a reader. And that goes against everything that you've laid out here. You're looking for sort of commonalities in the reception areas. And and his translations of Baudelaire are almost incomprehensible to the Germans. He's introducing so much otherness and foreignness that those texts were really not received at all in Germany. They're not read. They're too hard, they're too distorted, they're too foreign, they're too alienating. But I think the form that he's talking about is a kind of a community of languages that's beyond any one languages, and he's trying to expand the boundaries of the German language and all of those normative associations and commonalities and sense-making to make the language broader and enrich the language. So he's really introducing so much otherness that whatever the norms of the receiving language, they collapse under the pressure of this weight of these introduction of new ideas and concepts and forms. So, I mean, I like your lecture, but maybe another place of beginning might be more helpful because Benjamin is very tricky.
The essay is about languages, not really about translation. The passages that concern anything a translator actually does are very few. And this is a comment I would apply to virtually the whole of the 19th century German tradition of commentary, of theorizing, of translation. The problem was the lack of a national language and the need to develop a national language. And that follows through in 1923. Yeah. I just picked it up to upset people who want to start everything from Walter Benjamin. Yeah? My intention is not to tell you what Benjamin really meant. I don't know. Chris.
I thought that maybe we could inject a little bit more of that irony that you said you had to take out. When you were talking, I'm going to try to work myself backwards through some of the things that you pointed out that I found provocative. We'll start with this Agamemnon idea. It reminds me of the Monty Python speech where the hard of hearing oval in the corner is just yelling out everything quite more volubly than the person speaking.
Blessed is the Greek.
What? I think I've also on the actual television show you have the news and then you have the oval and they said with the person for the hard of hearing and then the person yells out. But this is something that's happening right now and taking on a very political form in Europe and the United States and in Canada and elsewhere, where we have the Occupy movement, we have La Plaza del Sol, where you have what we call the open mic. This is illegal at a U.S. manifestation or demonstration. We cannot use any sort. I say we because I'm part of this movement. We can't use any kind of amplification of the voice. So it's very important for us in order to step in and also interrupt certain kinds of gatherings that we use what we call the people's mic, right? So this might be another way of taking this and looking at the ways in which these forms of translation have been politicized and are coming directly from anthropological models. This people's mic is a form that has been introduced by anthropologists who have done field work in other countries, like the ones that you're talking about in southern Sudan. You know that Mein Kampf is going to be re-released in Bavaria, that the Bavarian publisher is, the statute of limitations on the copyright is running out, so that they are going to kind of preemptively finally publish Mein Kampf in Germany. But it's going to be an annotated version, right? So this would be a way for them to release a critical version in which they'll be able to say, oh, but look at this, and distance themselves from the text, which also gives you perhaps another example for what you're talking about there. This question of how do we deal with these texts that people in Germany are finding in German on the internet anyway, right? I can paste something on the internet in the United States, and someone will read it in Germany, and I'm breaking the law in Germany, but right? So that the internet is also adding another dimension of how can this law theoretically be broken in the age of the internet. I had one more comment, and this is my question. It has to do with questions of race and ethnicity and gender and sexuality. When you're talking about these statements that could be taken ironically in the alien eye. What happens when in certain communities, a person of a certain gender, a person of a certain sexuality, a person of a certain race or ethnicity can, by his very nature, by what he or she is identified as, cannot be considered a reliable translator or interpreter. And I'm not just saying that this happens in racist societies where we say we're not racist. When we say we're not racist, we're being ironic. You can read that as an ironic statement. If you're saying you're not racist, it's because you're racist, right? Or it could happen in a society where my first job doing consecutive interpretation was for a group of lesbian feminists who couldn't find a woman to interpret for them. So I was considered suspect, but I was let in because they had no one else, okay? And so in a final speech, I was doing the consecutive interpretation, and there was an outrage. This kind of pandemonium broke out because they did not want me as a man to be interpreting this person. So it can cut both ways. It's not necessarily just a right wing or a left wing or an oppressive or a marginal, but what do we consider a trustworthy interpreter or translator to look like is something that I think also cuts into the question of the alien eye. And I wanted to know what your views are on that, especially in a society. You live in Catalonia now. There are a lot of different kinds of politics of identity that might inform that kind of question.
Thanks for the input. Just my only comment is that the existence of debate, or presumably you were upset at being excluded from a trust relationship.
The thing is, they had no choice.
Yeah, but I mean.
No choice, so I wasn't upset per se. I just recognized that I did not meet the kind of identitarian requirements, no matter what my proficiency was linguistically. I did not meet the identitarian requirements of a translator or interpreter.
For them.
For them.
And you're not. You see, I'm upset. There seems to be something in at least the profession that we have that says you don't have to look like the speaker in order to be an interpreter. Right. You know, that we can handle that difference in normal circumstances. And the fact that there might be a debate about it, for me, becomes evidence that the translation form exists as something that can be challenged and produce meaning and produce debate. But it's not going to disappear because of that. Sorry. The other point is that the Occupy movement in the United States, I don't know where you guys are, but in Spain, it's almost not reported at all. The same as the Plaza de Sol movement in Spain is almost not reported in the United States. That you know, we can be the repeaters and the shouters and the human microphones, but across languages and cultures, it hasn't been handled very well.
I mean,
No,
to
it's-
the flatland, so we see a lot of coverage in the United States.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm pleased to hear that. Sorry. What is this? Stefan. Yes, sorry.
I come back to the concept of form in Benjamin. It is a very marginal curiosity, because you mentioned all the possible interpretation of the word form, except the possible meaning that surely were around in Benjamin period. I mean, you can find there the Denken form of Kant. You find there the symbolic form of Cassirer. You find there the logic form. You find there all the discussion between form and matter in Adorno, for example. And what have in common all these concepts of form, and which probably there is in Benjamin? What have there in common is the idea that a form is a whole with parts that are connected. And in certain sense, there is in that expression a sort of idea of structure which is deeper than we can imagine. So I think that, it's curious that all the German philosophy which stays back that idea of form, because you didn't mention, so maybe it's something Freudian, I don't know, but so I was curious because you escaped from this line. No? In a certain sense, all these kind of concepts enter in this idea of form. It's a simple curiosity, Anthony.
I don't know that I was disrespecting that tradition. It's interesting and provocative, I hope, to take the people who tried to define translation and ennoble them by inscribing them into the investigation of forms. But the tradition you're talking about would legitimize, I think, the rationalist attempt to investigate the structure of forms, with or without the term structure, the dynamics of forms, if you prefer. I don't think I'm that far away from it, from that use. But I leave that field of expertise to the experts over here, okay?
We have time for one more question before the coffee break, and that was Svetlana. So I apologize for moving us to the coffee room for the remaining discussion, but I think that would be an important place to continue. So Svetlana.
Thank you. The idea about the alien eye, the translator uses the alien eye and then the author doesn't. I'm wondering, in conference interpreting, that's, well, generally true, but can we problematize that when we transfer it to literary translation? Does the translator not have an affinity with the author? I mean, does the simpatico exist? Why does some things get translated more often than others? Is that translator chooses something because they can speak through that using, their eye, in some sense? And then on the other hand, does not the author use the alien eye by talking I, but not necessarily meaning themselves? The whole issue of the lyrical hero, I does not mean that, I, but somebody else.
Yeah, on the first question, the fact of supposed affinities or otherwise doesn't concern the linguistic fact, which is there, whether you like it or not. And it can be present or otherwise. One of Venuti's early papers, Simpatico, argues precisely the opposite, that one should not be in tune with the author, one can be a better translator. You can cut that case however you want, but I think that linguistic fact remains and should be troubling for people who don't want to see it. The second one about, the basic stuff we learned about literature, the author is not the narrator, and the narrator can create characters and things. Yes, the alien eye is working there. But here I've got something where the alien I is mapped onto a relation between languages. And it can be used in conjunction with quantity to fix a space for translation. It's a very simple claim and doesn't have to be mixed in with literary theory or suppositions about translatorship, authorship as effective virtues.
So please join me in thanking